The NBA has seen massive growth in the last 7 decades. Pertaining to current NBA franchises, this is what the landscape of the NBA looks like today. 30 teams, 28 cities, 6 divisions, and 2 conferences. So when looking into NBA history, it can be confusing to keep track of the movement of teams around the country. You get emotional reminiscing about basketball in Seattle. You remember there was actually an NBA team in Vancouver and also one in Omaha, Nebraska. Anyways, today we're going to dive into the strange and clustered timeline of NBA franchises. The NBA recognizes its origins as the BAA founded in 1946 and started its first season with 11 teams. Some of them we can still recognize today. The New York Knicks are one of the 2 teams from the inaugural BAA season that still survive in the NBA today under the same name and in the same city. The other one of those teams? The Boston Celtics. The third team from the inaugural season that still lives today were the eventual champions of the inaugural season, the Philadelphia Warriors. The Warriors stayed in Philly until the team was sold in 1962 and was shipped across the country to San Francisco. There they played until 1971, until they eventually moved to Oakland, where we have seen them play up until the last season. However, as we now know, the Warriors are moving back to San Francisco starting next year. The Washington Capitals, the Providence Steamrollers, the Toronto Huskies, the Chicago Stags, the St. Louis Bombers, the Cleveland Rebels, the Detroit Falcons, and the Pittsburgh Ironmen all survived fewer than 5 seasons before folding. So we're going to close their timelines right away. In its second season, the Baltimore Bullets joined the league to even the conferences and went bust in 1955. Now, I know that you might know that the Baltimore Bullets played way into the 70s, which is true, just not this Baltimore Bullets team, that was a later Baltimore Bullets team. Just bear with me. In its third season, 4 new teams abandoned the NBL and joined the BAA, and the conferences were balanced for the first time with 6 teams in each conference. And let me clarify here, the NBL was the National Basketball League, which was a rival league to the BAA, which was the Basketball Association of America. Now that's the league that the NBA recognizes as its origin and its history, not the NBL. The teams that defected to the BAA were the Fort Wayne Pistons, the Indianapolis Jets, the Minneapolis Lakers, and the Rochester Royals. And we're going to throw the Indianapolis Jets out right away as they ceased operations after 1 season. The Pistons started out in Fort Wayne, Indiana, which isn't really a city big enough to host a professional basketball team. Therefore, the owner moved the team to Detroit after the 1956-57 season, where they still play today. The Lakers were not the Hollywood bright light Showtime franchise we know today when they started out. They started out in Minneapolis, but were struggling financially after the retirement of center George Mikan. After they were almost sold to a Kansas City investor in 1957 and considering relocations to Chicago and San Francisco, they eventually moved to LA ahead of the 1961-62 season, where they still play today. The Rochester Royals won the championship in 1951, but were struggling financially in spite of this, which eventually led to the owners moving the team to Cincinnati in 1957. After new owners took over and stars left the team, the organization relocated to Kansas City in 1972, with divided home games between Kansas City and Omaha to try and win over both fan bases, and called themselves the Kansas City-Omaha Kings. It's a bit long-winded if you ask me. The team abandoned the Omaha market in 1975 and became just the Kansas City Kings. In the 80s, the team was struggling financially again and was sold to Sacramento investors, who moved the team to Sacramento in 1985, becoming the Sacramento Kings that we know today. In 1949, after 3 seasons, the BAA merged with its rival league, the NBL, to become the NBA, which we all know and love today. The NBL teams which carried over to the new NBA were the Sheboygan Redskins, the Anderson Packers, not Anderson Paak, their full name was actually the Chief Anderson Meat Packers. No, I'm being serious, that was their name. The Waterloo Hawks, who are not the Hawks we know today. The Denver Nuggets, not the Denver Nuggets team we know today, it's another Denver Nuggets team. It's confusing, I know, just again, bear with me. The Indianapolis Olympians, the Tri-Cities Blackhawks, and the Syracuse Nationals. You following? What we're going to do first is throw the Redskins, the Packers, the Hawks and the Nuggets straight in the trash as they either folded or left the league after one season. And we're throwing the Olympians in the trash too, as they only lasted 4 seasons. So in its first season as the NBA, there were 17 teams in the league, and the next season there were only 10. So there were only 2 NBL teams that lasted in the NBA, the Blackhawks and the Nationals. The Blackhawks were called the Tri-Cities Blackhawks as they played in an arena between Moline, Illinois, Rock Island, Illinois, and Davenport, Iowa. This market was way too small for an NBA team, and they moved to Milwaukee in 1956. They only stayed in Milwaukee for 3 seasons before they moved to St. Louis to become the St. Louis Hawks in 1955. The Hawks were successful, but they were sold to an Atlanta investor who moved the team to Atlanta in 1968, and this is the Hawks that we know today. The Syracuse Nationals were a successful team, but again, Syracuse was a small market not fit to have an NBA team. So the team was sold to Philadelphia investors in 1963, who moved the team there ahead of the 63-64 season. And of course, they still play there today. The league is at peace for a few seasons without any franchises storming in until 1961, when the Chicago Packers joined the league as its first true expansion team. Now, I don't know who chose to name a Chicago team the Packers at the time, but they must not have been from Chicago, because the Green Bay Packers were bitter rivals to the Chicago NFL team, the Chicago Bears. So that name was not well received in Chicago. Therefore, the team changed its name to the Chicago Zephyrs after 1 year.
Not great, not terrible.
The Zephyrs only stuck around for 1 year before moving to Baltimore, becoming the second incarnation of the Baltimore Bullets. The Baltimore Bullets were actually good. They had an MVP, but decided to relocate to Landover in DC and become the Capitol Bullets, which in my opinion is the greatest name in NBA history. That only lasted a year before changing their name to the Washington Bullets. The Bullets were successful, they won a championship, but their name was a little inappropriate considering the rising gun violence in DC. So in 1995, they changed their name to the Wizards, who we all know today. Chicago is the 3rd largest city in the US and is void of a franchise after having 2 teams that either folded or relocated. So in 1966, they were granted an expansion team, the Bulls. The Chicago Bulls have always been the Chicago Bulls and still play in the league today. The year after, in 1967, it's expansion time again, and the league is joined by the San Diego Rockets and the Seattle Supersonics. The owner of the Rockets got cold feet after 4 pretty bad seasons and sold the team to Houston investors, who moved the team to Houston in 1971, where they play today. The Seattle Supersonics won the hearts of the city of Seattle before dumping them and breaking all their hearts by moving to Oklahoma in 2008, where they now play as the Oklahoma City Thunder. Another year, another expansion. In 1968, the league welcomes the Phoenix Suns and the Milwaukee Bucks. Easy enough, as they both have remained the same franchises from the beginning. The next offseason, nothing happens. But the offseason after that, 3 new teams joined the league. In 1970, the Cleveland Cavaliers joined, who still remain the same organization. Same with the Portland Trail Blazers. The Buffalo Braves entered the league and played in Buffalo until 1978, when the Braves owner and the Celtics owner decided to swap franchises. Could you imagine that happening today if like Mark Cuban and Steve Ballmer just got drunk one night and just decided to swap franchises? That'd be fun. The Braves' new owner moves the franchise to San Diego, but the team is not very successful and is sold to Donald Sterling in 1981. Sterling moves the team up to LA in 1984, which he did not get permission from the NBA to do, so the league fined him $250 million. To put that into perspective, he bought the team for $12.5 million. That seems a little unfair even for a guy like Sterling. The fine was eventually reduced to $6 million, and the Clippers remain in LA to this day. There were a few years of quiet in the NBA until 1974, when the New Orleans Jazz were admitted to the league. The Jazz played 5 years in the city of Jazz until moving to Salt Lake City to become the Utah Jazz. Then in 1976, the rival league to the NBA, the ABA, agrees to a merger with the NBA. So, a little bit of context. While all of what we have gone through so far has been going on, the NBA has been competing with a rival league who, whilst not being as profitable as the NBA, pioneered in many ways, such as holding the first ever dunk competition and being the first pro league to introduce the three-point line. This absorbed 4 new teams into the league: the New York Nets, the Denver Nuggets, the Indiana Pacers, and the San Antonio Spurs. So do you remember the phony one-year Nuggets from earlier? This is the real Denver Nuggets franchise that's still playing the NBA today. Same with the Spurs and the Pacers. The Nets were not given a warm welcome to New York by the Knicks, and they were forced to pay $4.8 million to the Knicks for colonizing their fan base. This may not seem like a big deal today, but that fine meant they couldn't pay Dr. J, and his contract was sold to the Sixers. The Nets did not find great success when they settled in Long Island, so they moved to New Jersey in 1977. Again, the Knicks played school bully and demanded another $4 million from the Nets for taking over the fan base in New Jersey, which the Knicks had territorial rights to. So it's a pretty rough start in their new league for the Nets. The team remained in New Jersey, but eventually moved to Brooklyn in 2012, becoming the Brooklyn Nets. A little fun fact: due to negative publicity in the mid-90s, the Nets decided to shed their bad image by changing their name to the New Jersey Swamp Dragons in 1994. Yikes. Luckily, the decision was vetoed at the last minute by the co-owner of the team. As the ABA teams were settling into their new league, the league welcomed Dallas Mavericks and the Minnesota Timberwolves into the league in 1980. Actually, Minnesota backed out and wouldn't get a team until a few years later. And the Dallas Mavericks? Well, they've always been the Mavericks. In 1985, Commissioner David Stern laid out a plan to expand the league by 4 teams within the next 4 years. So in 1988, the Miami Heat and the Charlotte Hornets commenced operations in the league. The Miami Heat have been in South Beach ever since they started out. The Charlotte Hornets played in Charlotte until 2002, when attendance had plummeted due to the owner being accused of kidnapping and sexual assault. So the owner then moved the team to New Orleans. This did not mean the end for basketball in Charlotte, however. The market in Charlotte was still good, and the city was awarded an expansion franchise in 2004, where they played as the new Charlotte Bobcats. Back in New Orleans, the Hornets play in their new city until Hurricane Katrina devastated the city and operations had to be moved to Oklahoma, where they played as the New Orleans Oklahoma City Hornets from 2005 to 2007. After returning to New Orleans, they changed their name to the Pelicans in 2013, which they're known as today. Now let's go back to Charlotte for a second. The team in the city was originally known as the Hornets, but that name was taken as the Hornets were playing in New Orleans. But when the Hornets name became vacant in the 2013-14 season, owner Michael Jordan changed the name of the franchise back to its old name, the Charlotte Hornets. Rewind the clock back to 1989 and 2 new teams are added as part of the 4-team expansion. The Orlando Magic and Minneapolis finally decided they wanted the team and got the Minnesota Timberwolves. Both of these franchises have been the same since the beginning. The latest NBA expansion came in 1995, when the league decided it was moving to Canada with the birth of the Toronto Raptors and the Vancouver Grizzlies. Toronto proved to be a profitable market and the team remains there today, currently as reigning NBA champions. Vancouver, not so much, and the team eventually moved out of Canada to Memphis, Tennessee and became the Memphis Grizzlies. And that's it. That's basically a brief story of the clustered history of NBA franchises. And who knows when the next expansion is going to be. The commissioner has entertained the thought of moving into Mexico and also into Europe. So I guess we will have to wait and see. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed it, leave a like and a comment below. And if you enjoy the NBA and its history, subscribe for more content.